What's up, DBE fam? Welcome back to the show. This is a fun one. I'm really excited because I'm sitting across the virtual Zoom room from the one and only Miss Lauren Hunnewell. You're supposed to say hi.
Oh, hi. As you can see, I'm normally behind the scenes.
Yeah, very much so. If you didn't know who Lauren was or you don't know her by name, Lauren is the integrator of Digital Business Evolution. So she is the COO of our company. She is my right and left-hand woman. Depends on what season we're in, I guess, of the business. So really excited to have you here. This is the third or fourth time you've been on the show, but every time you've been on the show previously, it's been because you're either interviewing me or because we did like a big team roundup when we did our 100th episode. So this is the first time I'm going to be interviewing you. Are you nervous?
I am a little nervous. I'm not going to lie.
I might have your performance review out over here that I'm going to be marking off.
All fives.
Just kidding. All right. Well, let's get into it. We're just going to dive right in. I would love if you could just do a quick intro because I'm not going to record an intro. You can kind of tell us who you are. Give us your little elevator pitch.
Okay. I don't know that I have one, but when I tell people like who I am or what I do, obviously my name, I'm Lauren, and I was in hospitality for about 17 years until I pivoted about 2 years ago into digital business. Hence I work for Digital Business Evolution. And here we are. Like, that's kind of like the short of it all.
Yeah. So all these years in hospitality, something that I knew right away when we started working together was just how good you are with people. And so while you're number one COO integrator of our company, you also are the head of our success side of our company. So the customer support or the customer success side, everything that happens after the sale is something that you do as well. And you lead that department and making sure that people have phenomenal experiences, whether that's putting on our in-person retreats or just mailing out little birthday cards and thank you packages and welcome gifts, or checking in on like our coaching staff to make sure all of our coaches are where they need to be and doing what they need to be doing. Ultimately, just making sure that our customers have the best experience.
Yes, that is a second part of what I do.
Yeah. You juggle lots of different balls. And fun fact, your fiance, Victor, is our podcast editor. So what's up, Victor?
Hey, babe.
We keep it in the fam. I love it. Well, I'm really excited to have you here today because this is a topic and question that comes up a lot. One of the things that we talk about a lot at DBE is this incredible team that I have with me, next to me, behind me, and in front of me. And I certainly don't do it all alone, not even close. So we talk about the team a lot, and I talk about systems and scaling and automations and organizational charts, but our audience never really gets to see or meet many of the team members. So today is going to be a little peek behind the curtain around like you and what you do and how we started working together and all of that stuff, but also what the heck is an integrator? What does your day-to-day look like? And how does someone who's listening know when it's time to hire an integrator? Now, I will say, many, many, many years ago, I've worked with so many different mentors, and every single one of them has had an integrator. And every time I've been in a room with these people, a question will come up and somebody in the room will say, man, how do I get a fill in the blank with the person's name? So over the years, it's been, how do I get an Elron? How do I get a Jilly? How do I get a Nick? These are some of my mentors, integrators. And I remember years ago, probably about 5 years ago, sitting in the room and asking, not how do I get a fill in the blank, but more like, when am I going to be able to have someone in my business that someone else is going to say, how do I get a whatever? Right. And here we are today. We have been asked the question multiple times. How do I get a Lauren? Where do I find a Lauren? And so you're now a noun. Congratulations.
It's definitely been funny to hear that. I'm like, wow, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And it is this big question of like, how do I get a Lauren? So let's go back real quick and chat about sort of how we started together. We obviously met in New York City because that was one of my requirements for the job you were originally hired for. So tell us about how you ended up in New York City, because you're a Florida girl, and how we ended up connecting.
Yeah. So the New York story is really cool. So it's very cliche. It was a dream. And everyone always is like, oh, okay. I just went there when I was 16 and I said, one day I have to move here. And when I was 25, I decided, you know what, it's time. Picked up my bags, moved to New York, didn't know anyone. I was going to school, but I didn't have a job. I didn't have any friends, and I had no family, and I actually didn't even have an apartment. So I
Solid
just
plan for the planner.
college,
Really solid.
yeah. But it's funny. There is like, we talk, the term manifesting is thrown around like crazy anymore, as we know.
Yeah.
And yes, we all can manifest. And I do believe that I did manifest moving to New York and all of that, but there was a lot of action that had to happen in order to make that a reality. It didn't just happen because I laid in my bed doing it. But when I moved to New York, what I truly believed was that there was like this like lucky cloud over me that kind of just kept like pushing me in the right direction. And then of course, naturally, I've told this story before, but I was working at a Mexican vegan restaurant in New York City called Ja Ja Ja.
Wait, hold on one second. Did
Oh,
you literally show up to like Port Authority with a suitcase and no apartment?
no, so I'm resourceful, as we
Yes.
know. And I reached out to an ex-boyfriend's aunt and I was like, hey, can I like sleep on your couch for a couple weeks?
Get
And
out. I didn't know this.
yeah. And because here's the thing, when I was looking for an apartment, it was back in 2011. And there was not really Zoom, And so I was looking for an apartment in Florida, and it's vastly different to look for an apartment in New York. And if you have not done that before, it's like, you might as well tell them like your blood type, because they need to know everything about you. I was not prepared for that. You need to like have like $10,000. Like that was not what I knew. So no one was giving me the opportunity to even find anything. Like I would reach out and it would already be gone. So anyways, long story short, the aunt, I stayed with her for a little bit, like a couple days. And I quickly realized that she lived outside of the city and that it wasn't going to be feasible for me to like commute back and forth. Cause again, New York City. And so she had a second cousin who was 62 years old, and he had a moon room. And she was like, it's not perfect, but it'll work. So it was $850 a month. He was a Tai Chi master, and he was amazing. He was amazing. So that is my story of how I ended up with my first apartment in New York.
Wow. Okay. I don't think I knew that. All right. So now fast forward however many years later it is, you're working at a Mexican vegan restaurant, Ja Ja Ja.
Ja, ja, ja. And so while I was working there, the pandemic hit. And so plans changed. I was like, okay, I had to reevaluate my life. But prior to that, because I'm jumping ahead, stories go so fast.
Yeah, I'm like, we just missed 9 years. What were we doing in New York for 9 years?
For 9 years, gosh, yeah, I guess it was 9 years. Well, I was going to college, and then, I finished school, did the whole corporate gig, was not into the corporate gig. Quickly realized that after about 4.5 years wasn't for me.
Did you wear a suit and blazer?
Well, they sometimes would require it, but like I just wasn't about that.
Picture that. I can't
I
even
just wasn't about
that.
that life. You wouldn't believe it. In New York, I got rid of all of my corporate clothes. I had a huge IKEA blue bag full of them. And I was just like, this isn't my life anymore. And I got rid of all of them. So I know Mike can like relate to part of that.
Oh yeah.
I don't think he got rid of his suits, but there's days when you're like, oh, I'd like to wear that corporate outfit, but you're like, nah, not really.
Yeah. Okay. Go on. So 9 years, we go to school,
working corporate, leave corporate. After I left corporate, I kind of had like a quarter life crisis. And I was like, I'm a loser. Where am I going with my life? All these things. Fast forward, I ended up at Ja Ja, working at the Mexican vegan restaurant. And then fast forward about 6 months from there, and I was about to move into an apartment in Harlem. It was going to be $500 more a month. I was like, where am I going to get this money? I had no idea. And so I was, scrolling the old Instagram, and lo and behold, I see a story from Jess Glazer. And I had been following you, but I wasn't like always actively following you. And like, because the algorithm, I didn't always see everything you posted, but I knew who you were. You did like the banana phone and your headstands and all that. So I was like, oh, she's cute. I like her. And she was like, I'm hiring 10, 15 hours a week, $20 an hour. And I was like, that would cover my $500. And I think I could commit to that, because previously in my life, I would overcommit. So I applied. And then that day I was reached out to start the interview process.
Yeah. So going back on my end of things, and I've shared this story before. I actually was having a conversation about an hour ago with one of our mastermind clients, one of our elite mastermind clients. And she sort of is in this weird transitional period where she knows she needs to hire someone, but it's like, not only do I not have the time and capacity to hire and train, it's more about the money. So she's like, I'm a little bit tight on the money right now with my profits, the profit margins. And like, I don't want this profit that I do make to go to this other person. And I had to give her a really simple reframe, or I didn't have to. I gave her this really simple reframe, which I have, taken this medicine myself a couple of times. And back in 2019, when I had first put that posting up at the end of 2019, that's the position I was in. And it's this idea that so often we want the plant to get bigger in the pot, right? And we're like waiting for the tree to get bigger. The plant's got to get bigger. And I just want it to get bigger. And when it gets bigger, I'm going to move it to a different pot. But what's actually going on inside the pot is that its roots are pressed up against the edges and it doesn't have any more room to grow. So until you take the leap and you sort of put that trust or faith or surrender into taking it out of the pot, putting it into a bigger pot, and sort of just trusting and understanding that it can now grow into the bigger tree that you're looking for, but it needs the space to grow. That's kind of the play you have to take when it comes to hiring. And so when I was hiring for your position, which at the time was an executive assistant, is what I was looking for. I needed someone to just help get stuff off of my plate because I was at capacity. I was totally full. I was burning out. All good problems to have because we had, I had clients coming in and all of that stuff was really great. But I was sitting in this position of, I felt like maybe do I really have the money to do this? Even $20 an hour for 10 to 15 hours a week, it was scary. But I was offered a reframe by one of my mentors who said, isn't the point of hiring someone so that you can open up more space to bring in more revenue? Isn't the point of hiring someone so that they can help bring in more revenue for your business?
Mm-hmm.
And shouldn't they ultimately be paying for their own salary at that point? And I was like, dang. All right, cool. So I put it out there. You go through the interview process. I got to make you sweat a little bit. I'm not going to say it was a no-brainer hire, but like, come on, it was a no-brainer hire. You did a couple different things, a couple different interviews, and you did a project at the end. And this project that we had put you through showed me how just resourceful you were. And also how many cracks I had in my business foundation, because one of the things that we asked you to do was to fake pitch me to a podcast. It happened to be one of my favorite podcasts at the time. And we don't need to say the person's name. Had you ever heard of them before?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't think you did either. So she faked pitched me to this podcast. And in the fake pitch, you proceeded to talk about one of my programs, which was Moonlit or Sunset or whatever you say. And I had not run it. I had not run that program in like 2 years. Like, how the heck did she know about this program? And I went to my website and I saw that my bio was talking all about this program that I no longer ran. So it was a really cool moment for me to be like, wow, you were super resourceful and got gritty and went and did your research, but also we didn't tell you which podcast to pitch me to. You fake pitched me to like my favorite podcaster, which I don't even know how you found that out. And then you found cracks in my business immediately where you were like, and just FYI, I don't think you run that course anymore. I was like, all right, fine, you're hired.
Well, what's so funny is that, so I went through 3 interviews just for the executive assistant role, right? And a lot of people would be like, oh, wow, that's a lot, right? But that immediately tells you, do you want to hire someone? And is this person committed? And the funny part was, and I don't know if you know this too, is that there was like the test project of the email of the pitching. And then I also had to plan out an event. And they were like, oh, can you walk us through start to finish of planning out an event, a live event? And I was like, oh, that's cake. That's easy. That's my wheelhouse, So it was like, it was like 5 minutes. She was like, this is great. Jess is going to love you. The next interview will be with her. And I'm like, amazing.
Yeah.
And then you and I got on Zoom and it was just like instant, like chemistry, know?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, and I share this with our clients all the time, for me, yes, it's a assistant positions, right? Like, how serious do you need to be? But for me, I knew I wanted someone that could potentially grow into a different role. And so it was very clear on the application process kind of job description, nothing is beneath you and nothing is above you. And I even think I had said, I don't have a dog, but if I did, you have to be willing to pick up its poop, but also help me run pieces of the company. It was like, I just needed someone to help me with everything and anything. And you came in at a time where, I mean, we both were just kind of thrown into the fire, because as soon as so you onboarded January of 2020.
Yeah.
And as soon as pandemic hit, it was wild. We were in LA hosting an elite retreat for our elite mastermind members, and the world shuts down. It's March 13th. We're literally in LA. You and I barely know each other at this point. And we're like, what do we do with all these people? And everyone's freaking out and wants to fly home early. And you just navigated it so beautifully. And I remember how nervous you were to ask me for a selfie at the end of the retreat.
Wow, you remember that? That's so funny. I was by the pool.
Yeah. You're like, is it okay if we take a picture together? I'm like, yeah. Did you know at that point that it was going to turn into something more?
So backing up just a little bit, when Jess and I had the interview together, she asked me a really profound question, right? I mean, it's not profound, it's a question that gets asked, but she asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And so funny enough, for some reason, sometimes before I go in an interview, I always know like a question I'm going to be asked. And I was like, I knew you were going to ask me that. And my response was, if I get this job, I feel that it's going to change the trajectory of my life. And so when I was hired and, we were going through everything and then the whole pandemic, I wasn't too sure which direction it was going to go. I was hopeful that it could turn into something, but I always knew nothing was promised.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so funny to go back to that time and be like, wow, how much the evolution has truly been,
I know. And we've talked about it before too. One of the requirements was that my assistant needed to live in New York City, because I wanted them to physically be at my apartment with me once a week. I wanted that like in-house relationship of just being able to like get things done and sit and banter across the table together. And so you'd come to my apartment once a week and we'd sit like awkwardly at my desk together, and then we'd eat lunch like so awkward. And I'm like, so what do you do for fun?
Oh my gosh, I totally remember that. Like I would bring over my little lunch and I'd put my jacket in the closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we'd go in your office and you'd be like, okay, like find sponsors for the retreat or like send birthday cards. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. And then you'd be like, you want to have lunch? I'm like, okay.
I know, every time I'm like, Lauren, you could put your lunch in the fridge. You'd like leave it on the counter. I'm like, you can use fridge space. It's fine.
You're like, you can have coffee, you can have
Yeah.
a seltzer, like it's okay.
Yeah. So wild. And I really was just throwing such random things at you, but I still till today appreciate it so much, because it was, you would leave my apartment, take whatever thing I needed you to return at the post office or Forever 21. I guess at the time it was Forever 35. And you would then go down to the restaurant and be a manager of the restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
There were times even, I mean, during the pandemic when I would be taking calls from the restaurant with you.
Yeah, I remember.
Because they had no idea I had a second job. So,
crazy.
Yeah.
And at the time when you came on as an EA, I did have some other team, kind of, sort of, but you came in January. And then by June of that year, we onboarded one of our other core executive team members who I had known previously. And she came into the business. She's still with us today. And so you and I and her Amanda, we started to kind of create this team. We started to kind of create like this little organization. And I had other coaches. So I always had coaches that were working with me, but I didn't have like an executive team. And then we brought Amanda in. And the funny thing was, the role that we brought her in for, we originally thought she would be the integrator. And it was not that far after we brought her on that we were like, oh, she actually doesn't really want to do that stuff. She doesn't really like that stuff. And you started to show us more of an interest in that. None of us even knew what an integrator really was, though, right? So shout out to Rocket Fuel for that book, because it kind of taught us all what an integrator and a visionary is. At what point did you start to really pick up? Because I remember when I felt the shift, but at what point were you like, I think I'm meant for a different role?
So when I decided I was leaving the restaurant, I think that's when I realized, wait, I think that I want to do more in this business. And I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like. I remember before I decided to leave, I had emailed you and Mike and I was like, hey, I would love to have a conversation with the two of you and see where this could go. And maybe I could pick up some more hours. And I asked for a raise. Because I started to realize I was not an executive assistant anymore. And so I was like, I'm doing tasks that are a little different. Now I chose to do them and I picked them up and I gladly did them. It wasn't like I was being like taken advantage of or anything. I was showing that I wanted more, which is, if anyone has a job out there, a corporate job, a boss, like always show your boss you want to do more, don't just do the bare minimum, because you're never going to go like where you want to go if that's what you're doing. And then you and Mike came back to me with, okay, we'd love to set up a meeting. And then Mike told you to tell me, we want you to have a presentation for us.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got that email and I was with Victor, I don't know where we were, but I was like, oh, they want me to do a presentation. He was like, oh, wow. And I was like, I'm so excited. I'm going to kick ass. Can I say ass?
You could say that. You say it. I'm like, you're the podcast manager, aren't you?
Like,
yeah.
And I believe I did. I believe that was a really fun. And then it was so funny too. I had like shared it on stories and it was your branding and you were like, is she using my branding for something personal?
Yeah.
And I was
I had a conversation with you about it.
I was like, oh my God, no way. Never.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
But I branded it for you to make you happy.
Yes, of course, which we loved. But oh man, I remember watching you on stories working on some like Canva thing. And I'm like, that's my branding. I don't understand what she's doing. And one of the things that I was very clear about when I was hiring, going back to even the EA, the assistant role, there were a lot of people who applied. And if I'm being honest, there were a lot of applications that the reason that they were interested in this role was because they wanted to learn from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a hard no. So if you're listening and it was you, I love you, but that was the wrong answer. If you're listening and it wasn't you, just think about it moving into the future.
Yeah.
Here I am, a coach and a mentor helping people build their businesses. If you want to learn from me, you can either learn from my free content or you can come into one of my paid programs, but I am not going to hire you and pay you to learn from me so that you can ultimately leave and build your own business. So I was very clear that I wasn't looking for someone who wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, that's not to say you can't do your own thing and we don't support that, but this was not like hey, come learn from me for a year and then go build your own thing that looks exactly like mine. Like I just didn't want that. So I was very clear about that. So we ended up bringing Amanda in June. Mike comes into the business in September of 2020. Big year, big changes. It's the fall of 2020, wrapping up to holiday season. That's when you ask for a raise. You give us this presentation. I have a minor meltdown. But then quickly remember that the quality of your life and your decisions and your business is dependent on the quality of the challenges and conversations that you're willing to have. So I called you out and I was just like, hey, what's this thing? It's making me a little uncomfortable. And I think maybe I even brought it up to you after you presented. And I think I had told you how I felt. But you killed the presentation. It was wonderful. And then by February, so just about a year after you first got hired, that's when we decided, let's do it. Let's make you an integrator. But what I think is really important is what you just said. You took the role. We didn't promote you. It wasn't like up for grabs. It wasn't like, all right, everybody on the team compete for the role of integrator. You took it. You just kept taking more stuff off my plate. You did stuff that was outside of your scope of practice. Maybe as an assistant, you constantly were offering support in so many different areas of the business. You also were showing me that you were reading books about being an integrator and taking webinars from courses and joining programs and masterminds and all these things, like to learn about what it really looks like to be an integrator and to be an operations manager. And so it just felt like a really easy yes for us. I mean, obviously it was scary to have to figure out like a full-time salary and bench and benefits and pension and all that stuff, but you can figure it out. You can, it's all, what does Marie Forleo say? Everything's figure-outable. It's figure-outable, which I think we were both at that event in New York and we didn't know each other.
Well, that's the other really funny part. Like, as I was saying in the beginning, like the manifesting, all that stuff, is that the irony of all of this is that Jess and I lived in New York City. I don't even know how many years collectively at the same time, but she was running her old company Fit Trips. And the amount of times I almost went to Fit Trips is crazy. We both were at the TIU event. Yeah. We were at the Marie Forleo event and we never ran into each other. But funny enough, she always says that if she knew the person, she wouldn't have hired them.
Yes.
And so I truly believe that God had me wait to meet you because this was supposed to be the purpose and the path. And as I was saying in the beginning, when I moved to New York, there was like this lucky cloud over me. Little did I know like what the trajectory of my life was going to be, with all of this. And it's like, it's really actually bananas and crazy when you like look back, and
It is.
it's your favorite quote, right? Like,
Yep.
Can't connect the dots looking forward, can only, connect them looking back. And it truly is that. And when I asked for the integrator position, it was a really interesting way that it happened. Like as I said, I had no idea that that's what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I was on a plane ride out to you in Sedona to go to a team retreat, and I read her mentor's like business of performance book, and I read it cover to cover, and I was like, oh my God, I want to be the integrator.
Yeah.
And then funny enough, you had just come off your mastermind weekend with your mastermind, and they told you to hire an integrator. So it was like, what kind of what is that called?
Divine
Kismet?
interventions.
Yeah. And so I basically was like, so I want this job, but they like weren't saying yes or no. And I was like, why are they not telling me that they will hire me? Well, funny enough, within that, I was getting engaged. They knew that. I obviously didn't know that. And so they were like waiting until that all happened to go, to be like, hey, we're going to hire you.
Yeah. And it was, we were at our team retreat. So it was Amanda, Mike, you and I.
Yeah.
Pretty sure there was a bottle of wine, because we do let loose sometimes and have a drink or two. And so there was a bottle of wine, and we were all just sitting down after like a 14-hour day of brainstorming, and there's whiteboard papers everywhere. And it's like mad scientists in the room. And it was in this like really laid back, silly, laughing, having a glass of wine or two, where it kind of came out where you were just like, by the way, like, I want to be the integrator. And Amanda was like, what? And I'm like, what? And Mike's like, what? But then the conversation started to like unravel, and it really did make sense. And it didn't take much for us to all get on board, because it was important for us to Amanda to be on board too. This team sort of had come up together and really been built together, and the culture was together. And that was the job that we thought she was going to do. And then when we brought Mike in, we thought he was going to do it. Yeah. And then we learned that it really wasn't his favorite thing either. So now here we are. However, 2 years later, right? Just about almost 2 years later.
Well, 2 years later. Yeah.
And now it's been over 3 years that we've been together, working together, which is wild. And you run the show, you run the company, which is crazy.
It really like, sometimes I'm like, no, that's not what I do. I have to like humble myself in my brain, because it's just, it's like, wow, there's a lot of moving pieces, but I love what I do. I'm obsessed with it. And we were talking about, the hiring and whether or not, someone like, how do I know how to hire an integrator? Right. And so my best advice, and I always say this to anyone that asks, especially in the DBE mastermind, because the team is in there with them, I always tell them, why not just hire an executive assistant? Why not hire someone that's maybe not at that level, and see how you connect with them? Because you truly have to be able to trust that person so much. They're literally like, they are your right hand, and if you can't trust them and they're not loyal to you to a fault, like, forget it. So start small and really connect with that person, and make sure that they are gritty, because as an integrator, you have to be gritty. You have to want it. It's determination, it's discipline, it's long hours. Like, if you're lazy, don't even think about it.
Yeah. It's also an interesting role, because I say you run the company. I mean, at the end of the day, the decisions I am the decision maker. I'm the final decision maker. It's still mine, as much as it's Mike and I, it's a family business. It's still mine. And I'm definitely the face and the founder of it. But with the operations and like the people management and the team, the project management and all of the puppeteering, I mean, you're literally like a marionette control, just moving all the pieces and making sure that we have everything we need. I would imagine that sometimes it's difficult to push back on your boss, or in your case, you kind of have two bosses and they're married. So that's also interesting. But I would imagine sometimes it's tough to be like, hey, actually, I know you're excited about that, but this isn't going to work, or we can't because of XYZ. Do you find that it's ever challenging to kind of, it's not combative. We don't argue. We never argue, but
never.
Is it ever uncomfortable for you to be like, I'm going to have to pop that balloon?
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And I think that has been one of the biggest elements like of growth in this role, is being able to have those hard conversations. And also I'm at a point currently where that is coming up even more for me, where I'm like, wow, if you really want to be this integrator, this COO, you want to take this company to where we all want it to go and help all the people we want to help, then you're going to have more hard conversations.
Yeah.
And sometimes you are going to have to say, hey, this is not a priority. This is the priority. But that's the role. That's what it asks of you. And hard conversations are, you're going to have them in business. So don't shy away from them. And the sooner you can have them, the easier it gets, because it's not, at the end of the day, it's like Jess, of course, this is her company. She's the boss. Right. But I was just telling this to Victor yesterday. The truth of the matter is Jess doesn't, it's not that I think to myself, oh, I've got to make Jess happy. It's what's the vision of the company and where are we going? And I allow the vision to drive me. And the vision is what tells me, yes, we're on the right path, or no, we're not on the right path. So
I'm so glad you just brought that up, because my next question was, how important is it for you, the integrator, to be enrolled in the vision and the mission?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. It's literally everything. I was just listening to one of my mentors, who is Layla Hermosi. We love the Hermosis over here at DBE. And Layla is an incredible COO. I mean, she's just like goals. And she said, the other day, like, you have to have your operator as it's almost the most enrolled. Sometimes they're more enrolled than anybody else on the team. And I mean, I think I ride for DBE pretty hard, like I love what I do. DBE. Yeah.
I mean,
I can get a tattoo,
Your sister is your assistant. Your fiance is the podcast editor. I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, I do. But it's great. It's so amazing to do what I love, to have found what I love, and to work with people I love. Like it's just, and you're probably listening thinking, wow, this is crazy. But it is possible when things truly line up and when you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Let's talk about our relationship for a second, because I think it's really interesting. I had someone ask me the other day, actually, someone asked my mentor this, like the day before someone asked me this question, which you're like, huh, so funny, right? Like, okay, I guess I was there to receive whatever I needed to. And the question was, how do you sort of create the boundary between friend and worker, right? When like ultimately that's the role. It's like I always say with me, but you work for me, you work with me. Yes, but you work for me. And for you and I, it didn't start as a friendship. We weren't friends first, and then you started working with me. It was, you came in to work, and then the friendship grew, obviously. And my perspective is that you would do pretty much anything for me as a human, not like for the business, but you're like a little pit bull that people have to get past in order to get to
100%. I'm the guard dog.
You're super protective of me and my energy and my relationship with Mike and my happiness and all of that. So it's awesome. And the question comes up of like, what would I do if you quit? Or what if I had to fire you? And then like, what happens to the friendship? Or is it friendship first? And sort of like, where does all of that go? And how do you deal with that? Or how do you get through the day-to-day knowing that like you could quit one day?
How do I get through the day-to-day?
Well, both of us, it's just a conversation. Like this is what the client was asking. I mean, it's like, how do you handle it? And I'm like, I mean, what you focus on, you find. So I'm not going to sit here focusing on the fact that you might quit one day.
No.
But also asking myself the question of like, am I doing everything in my power to make sure that you have the best work environment and that you're happy and you're taking care of your own health and I'm supporting you and all of that stuff. But yes, when it does come down to there's a friendship and like we can do the drink bottles of wine and go dance on tables in Vegas, which we've done, but then also this is work.
Yeah.
We got stuff to do.
I mean, I think one of the great qualities that I have, not to toot my own horn over here, toot away, is that I really believe in professionalism. I'm not afraid to say I'm 37 years old. And so I am on the spectrum of, the old hard work, and like, that's my parents, they were gritty and all of that. And so I've just always prided myself on being very professional.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, when you work for someone, yes, you can become friends, but the reality is it's business first. Yeah. And that's what I got hired for. I didn't get hired to be your friend. I got hired to be your employee. And so I think I've always known that. And even I've always had a rule of thumb in my life that anytime I had a coworker, even like waitressing, right? It was always business first. First, we got to take care of our customers and then we can be friends. But we're not going to sit here and chit chat and not make money because we're here to make money.
Yeah.
So if we're not doing that, then like we wouldn't be here. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that with you and I, but it's just the truth. It's like the business has to come first, right? And so I think with those types of thoughts, you can think about it, right? Like, what would it look like if I wanted to quit, right? Which in my mind, I always think to myself, because I am a loyal person, that like there would be conversations before anything ever happened.
Yeah.
And there would be like
ample
months
runway.
and months.
Yeah.
There would be ample runway and months of notice. And but I can't even like foresee that personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, how about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would agree on all of it. And sometimes it does get hard when we're like in the friend moment, which we're always friends, but like, oh man, sometimes there are just difficult conversations, right? And there's corrections that need to be made, and there's expectations that are broken on both ends, right? And balls that get dropped on both ends. And there's a kind and compassionate way to redirect, right? Or remind.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we do, which is really nice, which we've talked about a little bit on the podcast, I think Mike and I've talked about it. If we're using the phone to text message each other, which is very rare, that's like just straight friend stuff. Like, hey, thought you would like this, thought of you, here's a funny picture or whatever. But if it's business, it's Slack.
Yes.
That's it. And we do not cross the line there. And it sounds robotic, but it's just been a very easy way for us to and we all do it on the team.
Yeah.
It's a really easy way for us to compartmentalize. Yesterday was Amanda's birthday. She got a text message, right?
Yeah.
Like, even you working with Victor, who's your fiance, I'm sure you're not slacking him about your personal life, but if something for the business needs to get done or a reminder needs to be there, it goes in Slack. And on one hand, it's like just the mindset around it, right? Because it's in Slack, I know it's business, but also there's accountability.
Yes. 100%.
Which is huge. It's like, hey, this is what everybody needs to know on the team, or we use monday.com. Like, this is so everybody can see what's happening, which brings an open and interesting conversation of Mike and I being married and us having to create a separate little part of the org chart, which we call the owner's box, because naturally he and I talk about the business a lot. How frustrated have you gotten when we've come back and just kind of changed everything because the two of us decided to chat on the couch while you weren't there?
So to just like kind of put some context around this, I always like to call 2021 the year of my triggers, and where I had to learn a lot. And
I'm so grateful to be a part of it. That'll be my next course.
Yes. And so these types of things would happen more often than 2022. Sorry, not what year are we in, right? Geez, 2022. And so what I learned was that, okay, this is a reality that I can either fight or I can just lean into. And so I follow the EOS methodology, which we have in the business. And so I attend their calls a lot, and they're very helpful for anyone that's an integrator. And they've given me solutions to the problem. And so this was a solution to the problem, was the owner's box, because what would happen is I would feel a type of way, because naturally, how can you not? As integrator, you are second in command. Like, you're supposed to be helping to make the decisions and the calls. And then when you're left out of that, it just feels a type of way. But it's been a really interesting dynamic, the three of us, right? And like how to navigate all of this. And there's no easy answer. And at the end of the day, you have to do what works best for you in the business. And so I think we've all found a nice flow of how to make this work. And the owner's box, just that small differentiation works well. And you coming back to me and saying, hey, this is what we want to do. And I'll be frustrated sometimes, and you'll know that. Yeah. But we talked about this even at the retreat, that you will take the time though and send me 4-minute voice memos, to let me know why. Yeah. And I value and appreciate that, because at the end of the day, you technically don't have to do that. Right. And then I could be upset and frustrated, but you could be like, deal with it. Right. But you don't. And you do that. And then because of that, I meet you in the middle with that and say, okay, I understand. I see the vision. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're the visionary. So you get to lead us.
Yeah. Well, and you do the same thing. It's really important to give the why behind what the decision is or the change is, just like parents do with kids. It's like, it's not the best. I'm not a parent. Okay. So don't come at me, but I was a teacher. I was an elementary school teacher. So I have some practice. Because I said so is just not the best approach for most people, because they don't understand it. So they can't implement it again in the future. Right. So instead it's like, let me explain why, because the quality of your questions is dependent on the quality of the answers in the life that you'll have. So let me explain to you why. And this goes down to even business stuff. We'll have clients ask like, well, how many emails did you send on that day? And it's like, what's the purpose of the question? Because the number of the emails isn't the reason that it was a success or not. It's what the emails were about. What were the theme of the emails? What was the trigger that we did? Where did we put the link in for them to click? Like, what was the subject line of the email? It's not the magical number of emails that made it work. It's the intention and strategy behind the emails that made it work. So whether it's 3 or 8, okay, whatever, right? So the why is really important. And you do the same thing too, where sometimes you're like, hey, I don't know about that because X, Y, Z. So the owner's box, for the record, has become this playful thing too, right? Because Mike and I love to intertwine. Our life and our business are all one and the same. We do not compartmentalize. We've done episodes on the fact that we don't do date night. This is what works for us. Very similar to the Hermosis, whom we look up to and adore their kind of methodologies. I agree with pretty much everything they say. And we take the same approach. We're like, we don't need to do that. We don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good for us. We'll tap out if we're not interested. If one of us doesn't want to talk business, like we'll just politely ask, and the other person has to honor it without poking. Like, well, do you want to unpack that? I don't want to unpack that. I just don't want to talk about work right now. Right. But what happens is we get in flow. We're walking the dog. It's a 2-mile, 3-mile walk. We're in flow. Ideas start coming. Things start happening. And so now we'll quickly voice memo you and be like, note from the owner's box coming in hot, and like, so we've kind of made a joke of it, but it's been a really cool evolution for all of us. And there's also times where the roles get moved around where, yes, it's my company, but there are times where like, you're kind of my boss, and then I'm your boss, and then Mike's your boss, but then you're Mike's boss. And it depends what seat we're sitting in, because we are a small but mighty team. So we all sit in a lot of seats. None of us sit in the same seat. You can't share a seat, but we do sit in a lot of seats. And so the chain of command on the org chart quickly switches when you move into a different role. You're the launch manager, you're the head of customer success, you're the podcast manager, but you're also the integrator. But Mike is the head of the growth team. So if you're doing something which is podcast related, you technically report to him, but then he would technically report to you again as integrator. So it's just this kind of funny thing that we've really gotten into a nice flow with.
Yes. Yeah. And if you haven't listened to the org chart episode, we'll put it in the show notes so you can go back to that.
See, she's always thinking. So I want to get into some of the dirt about what the hell an integrator is and what you do and what your day-to-day looks like. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Because, I am your boss. So you better be busy during the day. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Am I busy?
No, we don't want you to be busy. We want you to be productive. And our ethos at our company is like, I don't care what you do or when you do it, as long as it gets done. You want to take a Tuesday off and go hang out by the pool? That is fine. We don't care. You want to take a workout class in the middle of the day, whatever's going to make you happy and fuel you and keep you healthy. Like, we're all for it. So shall we cut it?
Okay.
All right. So here's the deal. If you want to learn about what an integrator actually does, you're going to have to listen to part 2. I'm not going to give it all to you right here. You got to come back for part 2. We're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to get into it. We're going to get real raw, real honest, and we're going to talk about not just what Lauren does from the day-to-day tasks, but also things like boundaries, hiring, delegating, expectations, disappointment. We're going to get more into the team culture, communication, all the different pieces. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. We'll see you in part 2. I guess I should say, as always, friends, cheers to your evolution.
Your evolution.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.